an Empire Boxing and Unlearning Network production.
I wanted to go back and touch on something you said that was totally on my list here. A burning question I've yet to ask you as even a pal.
Okay.
So this is the first time on the Empire Boxing podcast. Talk to us about the transition to pro coach. Like, is that something that you daydream about? And what would that look like for you? You know, just, I don't know, tease us a little bit.
Yes. So, okay, look.
That wasn't a tease.
I'm not going to tease you. Look, I am working with athletes currently who have the ambition to go pro. The amateur game is very different, obviously, to pro boxing, as we know.
Another bag we can unpack.
Absolutely. You know, just from an energy system perspective.
Absolutely, it's freaking hard.
It's very amateur boxing is
hard.
very different to pro boxing. So your coaching style, aerobically, from a time management perspective, everything.
Totally.
So you know your application to being a high performance, high level amateur coach is very different to being a successful pro coach. And I would love to enter into the field of pro boxing, to work with some select athletes who have the ambition to do so. I do know my limitations though. And, you know, if it ever gets to the stage where I do decide to do that, you're kind of starting again. You're kind of starting from the bottom a wee bit. You got to look at it from a different perspective. You got to reapply the humility, reapply the commitment to learning, reapply being at the bottom of the ladder. And, you know, when it comes to progressing athletes, you know, abandoning ego and looking at obviously the athlete's development and their well-being, and you know, an athlete could place all the trust in you. Say, hey coach, you know, we're going to go all the way, and I'd love to do that. And but if at any point I can't take them to where they need to be, you know, recommending other coaches to work with athletes is key. While I develop myself as a pro coach. So yeah, I'd love to get into pro boxing. I love boxing, and more boxing is good for everybody, in my opinion. And there are plans to transition with a couple of athletes and take them through and explore together and see where we're at. You know, and obviously there are levels and there are different stages to pro boxing. You know what it's like in your first 5 fights, your management up until your first 10 fights, 20 fights, whatever that is, you know, it's very different. And, you know, when you look at pugilists that have been successful in the pro game, especially transitioning from an amateur perspective, and look at Anthony Joshua, for example, if we want to, you know, have a name that everybody's heard of, you know, he's transitioned from different coaches, from different styles, from different cultural applications, from different...
Everyone does at some point. Like even, who just left Eddie Reynoso? Is it Canelo? I
didn't realize he...
Yeah, don't quote me if I got that right. Jason, do you know?
Oh my goodness.
Someone just left Eddie Reynoso that was big. Andy Ruiz? No, Garcia. Ryan Garcia.
Yes, Garcia did leave.
Right?
Yes,
so, I mean, even like really high-profile athlete coach
it's got to keep
duos.
working for you. And if it doesn't, you know, you have to evolve and you have to leave, and it doesn't really matter where you're at.
And arguably when you're somebody,
sure,
that is way more challenging than you're just up and coming. Up and coming, no one's even keeping track.
For sure.
You can bounce around, explore different options and management and different promotions. And, you know, and then it's not till you're somebody that it makes headlines, right?
Absolutely. You know, I look at Anthony Yarden, his coach, for example, you know, a guy who's had around since the amateurs. You know, I've seen Anthony Yard compete as an amateur, and then I've seen him, you know, compete as an early pro in York Hall in London, and you know, and then seeing him, you know, compete against, was it Kovalev? I think.
Kovalev.
Yeah, and obviously the mistakes from the corner actually ultimately that came out of there, and these are reminders as a coach, like you have to evolve and progress and learn as you go along, and if at any point you feel that you've reached the end of your line and it's time to hand the baton over to somebody who will elevate that athlete, and then that's definitely something you should do. And I've even seen that here in BC with some young pro coaches or some pro coaches who are working with boxers who are now getting to that 5 and 6 fight range, and I'm obviously naming no names, you know, thinking, well, it'd be great to have a conversation, you know, to say, okay, where do we go from here?
It's interesting because you touched on the idea of ego. And again, we're not going to, like, this isn't about any particular people, but it's an interesting concept that arises in sort of a singular or individual style sport like boxing, and you have your team in your corner, you know, your head coach, the ego element.
Oh my goodness.
And when it comes time to sort of relinquish the control, let's just call it that, of said athlete for their development, parking that ego, if it hasn't been parked already, which it ideally should have been.
Sure.
becomes sort of the limiting factor, I think, to that athlete's experience. And
Yeah.
and it's a tough one, right?
Definitely.
Because at the end of the day, like, you know, and I'm not even going to throw myself in the same category as yourself as a coach, but as a coach, and I think this is a pretty accurate, broad statement, we're regurgitating all the things from all the other people around us all the time.
Sure.
Right? We're constantly gleaning different information, things that we saw, things we experienced as athletes,
Sure.
things growing up, you know, things on the internet. Like, no one's reinvented the jab. We're maybe fine tuning it as an application to a specific scenario.
Sure.
Right? Or reading certain fights or certain opponents and how we're going to utilize the jab different ways.
Absolutely.
But no one's inventing anything. So this like death grip that people have and on their athletes as like an identity crisis to themselves or their worth as a coach is crazy to me.
Yeah, and look, it's very much part of the game in boxing.
It is though. It is. But I've seen it even in the personal training world, which is a fascinating topic to me because it's the idea of like, if I come in with something, or if someone comes in, one of my, you know, my athletes comes in with something that's a complexity beyond my scope of practice, I'm not fucking touching it.
Sure.
Right? I'm not doing them any service.
Right.
And you know what I found? That people will respect you more.
I do think so. I definitely agree with you there. You know, there is that element of, wow, okay, like, you know, you've had the humility to suggest somebody else.
Yeah, like you could continue to take my money
and
pretend.
Yeah, but that's also not to say, you know, as a coach, you know, and I've had to do this with people, but that's not to say as a coach that, you know, one day you're not going to be the guy who gets somebody handed over to them, 100%. Right?
That's almost my point.
And this is it, you know.
It goes round.
But sadly, I haven't seen that consistently applied. And I do feel that, yeah, if there was a wee bit more of an approach to, okay, you know, this isn't about people not wanting to work with me because I'm not good enough or because I don't, you know enough, you know, and letting that go and just really kind of seeing where you're at. Everybody knows where they're at ultimately. See, this is the thing. Everybody understands their own reality and their own position. They do.
And you know your limitations. Even if it's uncomfortable, you know what they are.
But it's
we all have them.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, we all have them. I have plenty of my own, as you probably know.
I was going to say, I know.
But, you know, it's not to say that's the end of your road, though.
Absolutely
you know,
not.
And this is the thing that spurs me on. I'm like, I want to be the guy that people, you know, recommend as a higher level coach. I want to be the guy to be able to maybe help an athlete progress themselves onto somebody who's even higher level than me.
And that's a great aspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. But
we all should be aspiring.
And I have to check myself sometimes. I'm not going to, you know, relationship management. Why is it the top aspect of the sport from a coaching perspective, in my opinion? Because your relationship with your boxer this is a solo sport. It's one-on-one. It's a level of trust that's applied in the ring and out of the ring, and with that comes the development of a relationship, and there's a proximity that develops, you know, and there are emotions and there are shared experiences, and you develop a close relationship with people. You know, some of the best friendships I currently have are from ex-boxers of mine. You know, Marcus Davies is arguably, you know, my best friend.
Shout out Marcus.
You know, shout out Marcus. He's making his comeback, by the way. He's training hard. You know, like I'm looking forward to seeing him, you know, compete. But you know, there were moments where, you know, we questioned our relationship, and you know, maybe you should use another way of applying yourself in the gym, and maybe you should have a relationship with another coach. And yeah, I might think about it. And you know, there is pain, and there is
we're human.
You grieve that relationship if you lose it. I mean, we ended up kind of hanging out together, and we had a great year. And he was he competed in the nationals for BC, which is a great achievement for him. And you know, it's really, really interesting. You know, to the how do you switch off that personal relationship and the developments you've made in relationship with people to really thinking about the boxer and thinking back to when you were a competitive boxer and saying, you know what, God, I wish I had a coach that was really just looking out for me all the time in every aspect of the sport. I can't really speak about other coaches. All in all, the coaches that I've met in BC are great. You know, I'm sure there are negative aspects to everybody, and I'm sure people can point out some negative aspects to my game and my personality. We know that you probably could.
I wasn't going to say anything.
but yeah, you know, it's really about like how do you adopt your mindset to be able to let the growth in the athlete happen, because that is the goal.
Well, it seems to me if I may, based on kind of our chats about the high performance team and stuff, that the almost the perfect solution to the problem, if we could find a world at large scales and small scales where this could exist, is actually a team approach. Having a collaborative effort around your athletes, having people that have different skill sets that can cross over.
Sure.
But ultimately someone who's, let's say, an expert in something.
Yeah.
Right. With who of course have, other skill sets that they can apply. But, I feel like in a perfect world, if a team approach, I mean, even me from the training world, it's like if I have someone who's got stuff going on, my best case scenario is like they have a physio. And I can chat with that physio.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Or, if it's someone who has even a deeper spectrum of goals, like, they want to employ different lifestyles, lifestyle changes and things like that. Do they have a partner that's supportive?
Of course.
Can I have a relationship with that partner, or at least know that there's a support system at home?
Yeah.
So it's like, it really truly boils down to, I think, in a perfect world that, you can develop a team to help foster young athletes and pro athletes through their careers.
Absolutely. And it's actually interesting to say that, because I was going to hit you up on strength and conditioning, some strength and conditioning advice
really
for my athlete. I know.
Really?
I can't afford you, but I was just going to try
of course,
anyway.
I'd be honored.
But this is it. Is the thing I've learned is to draw on resources and draw on other people's expertise. I know a wee bit of strength and conditioning. If my ego took over, I would just limit my athletes' knowledge to strength and conditioning to my knowledge in strength and conditioning, which isn't even 5% of what your knowledge is in that
which
aspect.
isn't even 5% of some of the people that I pick their brain.
Exactly.
Shout out Harry Davis. Like he's my go-to if there's things that I don't know.
Good old Harry knows his stuff, and
it's a deep pool of knowledge that a lot of people don't even really understand or respect. How complex strength and conditioning actually is.
Absolutely.
What each term truly means as individually, and how it can apply to a camp or a program or
actually, having said that, I might just speak to Harry instead of you. Thanks, Jay.
Honestly, I wouldn't be offended at all. He's the best.
But no, like I said, and then from a coaching perspective, I draw on people that I respect and people who are, I consider mentors, and other people from around the country, people from outside the country, and I draw on their expertise and things, sometimes, and being able to ensure that you work within the team is so important. And I mean, you look at, say, for example, again, I bring back the example of Team BC's high performance team, which I'm very honored and privileged to have been invited on this year. We have somebody with a level of expertise in each department. We could just leave it up to the coaches and they could apply their things, but would that be the most prudent way? Well, I don't think so. Would that develop the highest opportunity for athletes to develop quickly and represent themselves and the province, say, for example, and Canada in the best way? Well, probably not. So yeah, reaching out is definitely a key. And what I have learned is when I've done that, my education has just moved on exponentially into the next level. And it's when you relax those shoulders and open up your mind and accept that people know more than you. That's when you really kind of sponge in all the info and absolutely drawing on resources and working in a team is definitely key.
So cool. I love that. What was who was your biggest coaching influence, or do you have a few of them?
Honestly, that's a really, really good question. That's a really, really good question. I wouldn't say that I have one. There are definitely a few. But ultimately, it's a funny one. I've really tried to, look at the good and bad from coaches and how their athletes have operated. From an amateur level and personal experiences with people, and then from the international and pro level, and looking at it from the outside, because you're only seeing the exterior of things. So it's been really, really hard, and I had to kind of check myself to say, I'd love to be this coach or that coach, but ultimately it's really only really about how do I get my athlete to win the next exchange and do so safely and recover properly for the next fight. And I've started to realize that my identity's kind of really been born out of my own identity, but looking at coaches, say locally, people like Jesse Pinheiro, I could come back to him. There are other coaches in BC, that I've had the pleasure of working with, and looking up to these guys and thinking, wow, Peggy Mertz, for example, another phenomenal coach and great human being, and she knows her stuff, inside out. There are a lot of young coaches I'm looking at who maybe are at the start of their career. I'm like, wow, these guys are great. They really know their stuff, and each one brings their own element of expertise and talent to the table. For example, Jesse Pinheiro has his own way of doing things, and he's really good at, certain things, whereas other coaches are perhaps a little bit weaker in that, but stronger than him in other respects, and vice versa. And so, it's a funny one. I've never really looked at coaching like, I want to be like X coach. I've looked at coaches from other sports. I've looked at coaches from boxing, pro and amateur, and decided, I would like to take an element of each one. People like Alex Ferguson and I was going to say John
Wooden. Who hasn't?
Exactly.
And if you haven't, you should. Just as a life lesson.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And looking at other sports and looking at other high performance directives and programs in other sports, and how you can maybe bring in elements of that to boxing. So it's really important not to be myopic in your approach to seeking out inspiration and education. When it comes to boxing. Expand, looking at F1 and Simon Jordan, all these different people. Michael Schumacher, and how his history and his relationship with Ferrari, and the team managers, and the way that they approach different things from a tactical perspective. And I know nothing about American football, but reading books about the psychology of the sport has really expanded my ability to think out of the box for boxing. So and that's a really cool thing as a young coach, who's maybe kind of coming up a wee bit. It's definitely something that I'm happy I discovered.
Yeah, I think that's such a cool thing you touch on really quick, and I just want to spend a second to park there, and because we both have had our experiences in let's say the blessed bill-paying fitness side of boxing, right? But what I noticed that was really interesting, and this is going to go back to looking at other industries to make it, more successful, instead of just sticking in your own pool. We saw, I don't know, what was it, maybe 5 to 10 years ago, somewhere in there, the rise of boutique fitness studios, right? So if, the big box gyms, like the Golds and the Good Lives and everyone just always studied from themselves, I don't think any of these younger studios would have been born in the boutique way. And I think the industry looked at hospitality.
Right.
It looked at the hospitality industry.
Right.
And brought elements of that into boutique fitness experience. All of a sudden, I got a scented eucalyptus towel. Shout
out Equinox, by the way. That's definitely what you get.
I'm telling you, and
you
got SoulCycle. They put a little card on your bike, Jana, you've had 50 rides or whatever. I mean, these are not typical fitness industry tendencies. This is not typical fitness industry customer service. It's maybe one dude that makes sure that your thingy scans and you're paying $30 a month and there ain't nobody there, and there ain't no eucalyptus scented towels, and you go through the turnstile and you just go out into the ocean of whatever. Yeah,
absolutely.
Right? So
absolutely.
That's
it's a great point.
That's kind of what came to mind.
Absolutely. And you know what? Actually, only really kind of moving to Canada and seeing the way boutique gyms, whether it's in spinning or, yoga or strength and conditioning, whatever it is, and seeing actually, it's almost kind of mint on the pillow type approach to a lot of these places.
Absolutely,
and I'm like, wow, this is part of the value add that people are getting. And
warm toilet seat or cold?
Always warm, even in the summer. Kidding. But yes, it's very much the same as looking out of your sport and boxing and bringing in different elements. It changes the game a lot of the time, and it's definitely something that I'm enjoying doing. A coaching friend of mine, Frank from Montreal. The last time I was over in Montreal,
Frank boxing coach.
Frank boxing coach is his IG handle. I've never seen a man eat that much steak in my life. He lives entirely on red meat. Very impressive.
I could rival your best steak eating effort.
I don't
Guaranteed.
know. I genuinely don't know about that.
I'm from Alberta. So.
But he's actually, we're at a dinner one night and he brought these clutch of books with him, and he's like, these are for you, these inspired me. And it was a couple of them were some very obscure books that had almost nothing to do with sport, and I was like, of these apply really? And he's like, this applies to this and this and that. And I was like, wow, actually, fantastic point. And those books are really, thanks Frank. They've really, really helped me. Lugging those from Montreal wasn't fun, but I'm glad I invested myself in them for sure. And it's really taught me about kind of branching out.
So cool. I just love that. I think that's just really an interesting, thing to think about and ask yourself questions, whatever industry you're in, whatever, you're doing professionally is what can you learn from other professions, other industries.
Absolutely.
Now let's talk a lot about your work with the Empire team as our bow tie wearing, white tuxedo sporting commentator ringside with your pals over there.
I mean, I couldn't ask for a better night. I get to hang out with Ryan O'Shea and Robert Cousins.
The Three Stooges.
Talk boxing, watch boxing, be immersed in boxing.
How much fun was the first show, the Resurgent?
Great. So it was so interesting. It was all behind plexiglass.
And tell us, for the sake of comedy, all the little funny things that went catastrophically wrong that maybe people don't know about, and all the things that were super fun, and what you guys were drinking back there. Because I know you were.
I don't drink.
I'm a
sober person.
I know who you are.
But spilling half a bottle of whiskey over the computer that we need to be able to cue wasn't great. So fireball and keyboards don't go together apparently. Not going to name names, Ryan. So it's been interesting. So let's talk about obviously the evolution of Empire. It's been really, really cool to know the people who founded Empire from the start, from that kind of step one, and seeing different personalities, apply different skill sets and come in and you started this movement, let's call it, during one of the modern world's most difficult times, during COVID, and COVID and boxing didn't mix. We nearly lost the sport of boxing, especially at an amateur level, because of the absence of competition. But you pushed through, and it was great to be at Resurgence and to be commentating, obviously behind plexiglass, which was in a separate room in the corner. Very kind of pushed off and then wearing masks.
To be honest, though, we actually wanted to have you out in the main area, but I pushed. To have
I
you
honestly
in the corner.
suspected. I was asking them. I was like, guys, are we here for a reason? They're like, sure.
Yeah, it was me.
I mean, honestly,
extra thick.
I mean,
plexi.
we are now synonymous, obviously, with the face of Empire, just because obviously of who we are, and the dynamic that we bring. I'm just kidding. But to move into obviously the show after Resurgence, and to be ringside again, and to really be in there, and to do the pre and post fight analysis and breakdown and debrief, and to kind of get up close with athletes. Last time we weren't even allowed to go anywhere near the changing rooms and whatnot, but it's been really, really fun and really interesting to see the evolution and the progression of obviously this promotion company, and how invested you are in the athletes, how invested you are in obviously the commercial side of the sport, because ultimately, let's face it, this is pro boxing. It's a commercial enterprise. And it's also great to see how your relationship management with all the parties involved, looking from the outside in, just as a lowly commentator.
The
minions. It's been wonderful to watch your progress and your evolution, and to be a part of it's been a big honor. But best night of the year really for me, is to sit ringside and shoot the shit with my mates and watch boxing and be able to talk crap into a microphone wearing a tuxedo. So it's been great. It's been fantastic.
We absolutely love, I think that the dynamic that you three bring is just it's perfect, because it's you've got Ryan, who's very, matter of fact, but then he comes out with these whip smart cracks now and again, and then
the more you get to know Ryan, the more that you get to understand that that's almost the exclusive way in which he speaks.
It's wicked, and then you've got Rob, who
Mr. Cousins.
Mr. Cousins, he can be very abstract. And then
Rob is the most abstract, most eccentric man I've ever met in my life, and I absolutely love him to bits.
And then yourself, and then the dynamic between the three is this epic commentating team.
Yeah,
and
no,
I mean, we can't imagine
we
the
love it.
event without you guys.
No, we absolutely love it, you know, and,
Yeah.
and it's been funny to see the wee mistakes happen, you know, by mistakes, you know, oh my God, like, you know, we don't have this wire, so we can't plug this into that. I'm like, okay, like, you know, let's, you know, it's never not fun though.
Yeah, blindfolded commentating without like comms or
Without
anything
comms,
like
yeah,
that.
you know,
Yeah.
but it's never not fun,
Yeah.
you know, regardless of what and how smooth it is,
Yeah.
or, you know, it's always great fun. And, you know, we love, the thing I love seeing are BC local athletes from BC or let's say from Canada, you know, coming in and making their debut as from an amateur, and maybe me having worked with some of those athletes when they're amateurs, or seen them when they were amateurs, and moving into that pro field and commentating on their first moments. You know, something that's like it's a huge part of their life, and a big point in their life, and being able to be involved in that, it's super special. And then obviously seeing, you know, meeting other boxers and looking at their progress and their success, and looking at the kind of cycle and the arc of their story from another perspective, which is obviously providing color commentary for the Empire events is really, really special. And then obviously seeing all of you guys happy at the end of it, you know, and
relieved,
going for a wee meal and a wee drink wee after, and like seeing how happy and relieved, and you know how proud of yourselves you all are, and I think that's really cool. And I just love seeing people succeed and being successful. You know, it's something I want for myself, and it's something I wish for other people, especially my mates. And yeah, it's definitely been a blast. Absolutely, I love it. And obviously, like, you know,
and we're just at the beginning, really.
Yeah. Oh, you're just at the beginning,
right? We're just at the precipice.
Yeah. I mean, always an excuse to get the mothballs off out of the old tux and
just give
get
it
out.
a bit of a spray next time. I could.
Yeah, I thought it was a wee bit whiffy last time. I blamed it on Rob though, and everybody bought it.
Oh, I bought it too until I knew.
Yeah, but no, I think it's very, very special. I mean, look at what we're doing now. This is just a wee part of obviously the empire they're building. Yeah, pun intended.
Oh,
and I'm very honoured, and I'm super excited to see where the next chapter takes you.
Us too. And now, I think in closing, it'd be kind of cool as our commentator, I want you to put on that hat for a second, and let's talk about just a couple highlight careers that I'm interested to get your thoughts on as we kind of come into the next event, the takeover on November 12th. Talk to us a little bit about, you know, give us your Rhett Gibbons synopsis. Where do you think his career is going to take him in the next little while?
I think Rhett's a really exciting guy to watch, and I love watching him box. You know, I saw Rhett make his debut against another good friend of mine, Arya Shari, at Resurgence. I think it was. I think they both made their debuts that evening, and then saw Rhett on the last show that we recently had. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, I know they had COVID and whatnot, and maybe the performance.
Yeah, Rhett had a tough camp.
He had a tough camp, but I like how clean he is as a boxer, how technical he is.
He's a technician.
He's that kind of technical application really makes him, you know, look good. And, you know, I wish all the best for Rhett, you know, and I'm really excited to see his next performance. I know he's going to be coming out, and I know he's going to be doing exceptionally well. I can see obviously winning the cards for Rhett, hopefully. And you know, I'm looking forward to commentating on him. He's a very easy guy to watch and commentate on. He's very matter of fact.
It's very crisp and clean.
He's very crisp and clean, and very, you know, he applies things very efficiently, and his movement's excellent. And he's a great guy to watch, and he's a very easy athlete to commentate on.
Awesome. Let's talk Kadir.
Kadir, my brother. Kadir is I've known Kadir a while. I was in nationals with Kadir a few years ago.
I used to spar with Kadir.
Way
back in Eastside Boxing Club.
In Eastside Boxing
Club,
when
I was just a young one.
Kadir Qadir is a great guy. You know, his story is awesome. You know, coming in from Afghanistan and you know, settling in Canada, and obviously the trials and the difficulties that he faced. You know, from a personal perspective, and he's always smiling, and he's always upbeat and happy.
So sweet.
And you know, he works with John Quinnett, who's another top lad over at Quinnett Boxing, and it was great to see him make his pro debut. It was great to, you know, I've coached athletes in the corner who have competed against Kadir. I've coached with Kadir at nationals, not as his coach, but, you know, I've been in part of the team that have helped him, say, at the last nationals that we had, you know, and I've seen long beard Kadir and babyface Kadir.
Yeah, both versions.
But let me tell you something about Kadir's boxing. It's always been highly entertaining, highly dynamic, very committed to you know, wowing the crowd and being very slick and smooth, and his counter box, his back foot counter punching is phenomenal. I love it. And I can't wait to see him fight again. I thought his last fight against the Valoria brother there, Terence was phenomenal. Another debutant, which is why I love your promotions company. You know, you are a great starting point, and hopefully in the future will be the pinnacle to
sit down Golden Boy
from
Productions.
a sit down Golden Boy Productions.
So let's go straight into Terence then. Talk to us about your thoughts on his career.
Terence, I don't know a lot about Terence. The first time I ever saw Terence box was at the last show. I love the fact that the lad had so much tenacity and pugnacity.
I thought that was an incredible match.
Breaking his hand. And continuing to fight.
So for those who don't know, Terence right now is suffering from an injury from that fight.
Get well soon, Terence.
Yeah, right hand. I think he said he hit Kadir in the top of the head, and he felt his
Kadir's
hand.
always been hard-headed.
Yeah, well, he's got quite the nut. Yeah,
he does.
And so Terence is kind of dealing with that injury. He's got a CT scan on the way. So Empire team wishes you a really speedy recovery, because we want you back.
Absolutely.
On our card for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was a very special moment, a very cool thing to witness and to obviously commentate on. Is to seeing two brothers make the pro debuts on the same card in the same evening. That is really cool.
It's magic.
It's super magic. Coming from the Mendoza gym, O'Neill Mendoza is a good guy, good coach. I've always kind of had a great relationship with Coach O'Neill, what I love, Michael's approach to boxing, the lifestyle approach that he brings to it, and his commitment to mental health, and progressing men's mental health, especially using the sport of boxing and allowing the sport to help you kind of break down and analyze yourself as a human being, but also his journey, his physical journey, and becoming a pro boxer and doing so well in his match,
so well,
incredibly well, so entertaining, it was a pleasure to see too. That was a special thing, and I don't know if it's been done before.
I don't
know if we can confirm that two brothers made their pro debut on the same evening, that come from the same gym.
That would be a good Google.
That would be a pretty good Google.
I wonder how the Charlo brothers debuted.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Worth a Google.
But very much looking forward to seeing both those boys box again for sure. Yeah.
All right, let's go to Artem.
Artem.
He was that was the first time I seen him.
Kitchen sink, the car that was parked out in the driveway. He came back in.
How was he standing still?
I haven't seen a guy be so tremendously successful in exchanges and face such an incredible opponent. And
let's just put out there the chin.
Oh my God,
Olivier.
Honestly, Olivier, biggest chin I've probably ever seen in my life. I was a meter or a foot away from the ring when Olivier had his back to me, and Artem, I think, landed a 6-punch combination and then just again started walking forward. And I just remembered seeing Artem's face, and he was thinking, well, what do I do here? But he performed tremendously well, very efficient round and round, very efficient in the exchange.
Normally my advice to someone like that would be straight out of Zombieland. I'd be like double tap, but he triple tapped.
He was going for it. It was insane. And a very, very interesting guy, super powerful, very explosive, great shot selection.
Belarusian Mike Tyson.
The Belarusian Mike Tyson. I don't know if that's a self-styled moniker that he's using or not, but
I know, but I coined it.
Jana's coined it.
Sergeant Lewis. That's mine.
Another one who I hadn't seen box before. I never met Artem before. Obviously, if the Belarusian Mike Tyson, fair enough. It's a pretty good way to describe him.
And let's close it off with Benit Bisla.
Benit Bisla, what a guy.
Yeah.
Tremendous athlete, comes from, Bisla Boxing out in Surrey. I actually, before I moved to Canada, I was visiting here, and I brought my team from Bahrain over to Canada to spar. Rashid was one of them. Rashid Merafar, who I touched on earlier. Ali Muhammad. A couple other lads came over, and Bisla was the first gym that we hit in BC. And Inder Bisla, who's head coach and owner of the gym. Wonderfully welcoming guy. Him and his two sons, Gavin and Benit, were sparring, and they helped us out. And I remember thinking this was probably in 2015, 2016, thinking, wow, this guy's good. He's special the way he moves, and he's a tremendous athlete. And his brother Gavin, great athlete. He's a member. He's one of the kind of knocking on the door of Team BC type guys, and has aspirations to go to nationals this year, and thinking, wow, like this guy's got it, you know, like very, very cool to see. And you know, fast forward, what's like 7 years later, 6-7 years later, wow, it seems like it was yesterday. You know, seeing the culture in that gym. Seeing obviously the coaching practices of Inder, seeing, you know, how Benit applies himself to the sport, and having seen his career progress. You know, he's obviously kickboxed quite a lot as well, so he's been a kind of multidisciplinary type athlete. And Benit's one of those guys where I always can't wait to see him fight again. I want one more round to watch.
Right.
I want 2 more rounds to watch.
Dan.
He's a very entertaining guy. You know, he looks good. He's got that great physical profile. You know, he applies himself so well in training.
High boxing IQ.
High boxing, like very high.
You can see him downloading his opponent.
I have to say, everybody in that gym has a high boxing IQ that's kind of operating that high performance level. You know, Harkira Najjar is one of them. You know, Benit, you know, Gavin, all these lads. You know, I can't. Benit, like I said, Benit's one of those guys. I can't wait to see him box again.
Yeah.
And if it's like a 5-round or a 6-round fight, I want it to be a 7 or an 8-round fight. I just want to see him have one more round. He's very entertaining. His shot selection is great.
Yeah.
You know, his obviously discipline to know when to pull the trigger in the ring is great, and I've seen that. You know, he came up against a relatively formidable opponent in his last fight, and it was the same as everything else. It was the way he executed his exchanges. He was really, really great, and he pulled the trigger when he needed to.
Yeah.
At Resurgence, you know, I think he stopped his opponent.
It was actually a grisly.
It was a pretty grisly knockout.
Grisly knockout.
And
available on
you know,
our YouTube.
Yes, available on the YouTube. But looking through 17 sheets of plexiglass, I could just make out that the guy was knocked out. But no, Benit's a fantastic one for the future, and I'm so pleased that he's, you know, from BC, signing with Empire, you know, and being part of that framework and fabric. You know, he's brilliant, and I'm sure he's gonna, you know, go into big things.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I mean, we could sit here and kind of talk about every athlete, and I mean, I would love to do that, but
when are you making your pro debut?
Yeah, I know, right? If Jamie Ward makes a comeback, I'll fight Jamie.
That would be one for the ages. I need to be ringside for that. Yeah, that would be one for the
no
ages.
corners, no coaches,
no gloves. No
mouth guards.
No mouth guards. Yeah. No, I'm down for that.
Cleats and shin pads.
Now we're talking.
And I'll fight Jamie Ward.
Now we're cooking with grease. Yeah.
Tariq, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you
so much
Thank
for
you so
joining
much for
us.
having me.
Yeah.
I had nothing else to do tonight, so
I figured.
Yeah, it was great.
That's why I called
recap.
you first.
Yeah,
I was like,
you.
Tariq doesn't do anything.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, I feel so blessed to have you as a mate. Listen, I'm not going to do this to make everyone cry, but just give me a second. I feel so blessed to just have you as a mate, and also as a coach and someone who's been in my corner in many areas in life, from boxing to just, you know, being basically family. So for me, it's amazing to have you on the show, and for all of us, like, to have you as part of Empire, making the experience for our at-home guests and you know, our audience just like that much better, and bringing all your boxing knowledge and your skill set and everything to the equation, and your humor, and we just love it. And so we're all really big fans, and we can't wait to see what you're doing next.
Thank you so much. Much love to you all, and I can't wait to the next show.
Thanks for tuning into the Empire Boxing Podcast with our guest Tariq, and we'll see you next time.
Make sure to listen, follow, and subscribe to Empire Boxing on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.